A black waitress sheltered a bleeding man during a storm, not knowing he was a feared Japanese mafia boss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now let's continue. The mop handle was slick in Tessa Johnson's grip, a familiar and grounding weight at the end of a long night. Outside, the world was coming undone. The wind, a living entity, shrieked around the corners of the Last Stop diner, rattling the plate glass windows in their frames. Rain fell not in sheets, but in furious, diagonal spears, driven by a gale that had blown in from the coast and smothered the quiet town of Havenwood in a cacophony of roaring chaos. For Tessa, however, the storm was just noise. The true peace was here, inside. The air was thick with the day's ghosts, the lingering scent of fried bacon, stale coffee, and the faint, sweet perfume of the cherry pie she'd sold the last slice of hours ago. It was a scent she had come to associate with safety. This was her sanctuary, this little bubble of checkered linoleum and worn red vinyl. After flipping the ancient hand-painted open sign to closed, she had performed her nightly ritual. The salt and pepper shakers were refilled, the napkin dispensers stocked, the chrome surfaces polished until they offered a warped, funhouse reflection of her tired face. Now, there was only the mopping, the rhythmic slosh of water in the bucket, and the smooth glide across the floor, erasing the day's footprints, resetting the world for tomorrow. It was a sacred ritual of closing, one that sealed her off from a past she never spoke of. The 2 years she'd spent in Havenwood were a balm on a wound left by the frantic, shrieking pulse of the city she'd fled. There, noise had meant danger. Silence had meant you were next. Here, in the quiet hum of the cooler and the lonely howl of the wind, she had found a semblance of control. She finished the last section of floor near the entrance and was propping the mop against the wall when the diner's neon sign outside sputtered. The word diner flickered violently, casting strobing blood-red light into the room before it died completely, leaving only the dim, steady glow of the kitchen safety lights. Tessa sighed. Another thing to call the landlord about in the morning. She walked to the front door, her worn sneakers squeaking on the damp floor. Her hand was on the deadbolt, the final satisfying click that would officially end her day, when the sound came. It wasn't a knock. It was a frantic, fleshy thud, thud, thud against the glass, a sound of desperation that cut through the storm's roar with shocking clarity. Tessa froze, her heart instantly seizing in her chest. A cold spike of adrenaline lanced through her, a phantom echo of a fear she thought she'd left behind. Her mind raced. Drunk driver missing the turn, teenagers daring each other. No one should be out in this. The rational part of her brain told her it was likely harmless, but the deeper, scarred part whispered warnings of malice and violence, finding her even here in the middle of nowhere. The thudding came again, heavier this time, followed by a low groan that was swallowed by a gust of wind. It was the groan that did it. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. Her hand trembled as she reached for the deadbolt, her knuckles white. "Don't!" the scarred voice screamed. "Slam the door. Call 911. You don't know who's out there." But another instinct, one buried deeper, was stirring. It was the memory of being helpless, of praying for a door to open, a hand to reach out. It was the compassion that had brought her to a town like Havenwood in the first place. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she twisted the lock and pulled the heavy door inward. The storm lunged into the diner, a vortex of wind and water that sent napkins scattering across the clean floor. Framed in the doorway was a silhouette, a tall, broad-shouldered man made monstrous by the dark. For a moment, he just stood there, swaying. Then a flash of lightning illuminated him, and Tessa's breath caught in her throat. He was a masterpiece of destruction. His tailored suit, so black it seemed to drink the meager light, was plastered to his frame, drenched and ruined. But it was the other liquid, the one that stained the pristine white of his shirt, a sickening, spreading crimson that held her gaze. Blood matted his dark hair and streamed from a wicked gash on his temple, carving a path through the rainwater on his sharp, angular face. His left arm was clutched tightly to his side, and the fabric of his jacket sleeve was a shredded, sodden mess. He took a stumbling step forward, his expensive leather shoes squelching on the linoleum. His eyes, dark and piercing, found hers. For a split second, she saw past the pain to a flicker of something ancient and desperate, a raw plea that bypassed thought and struck her soul. He opened his lips, and a single, guttural word escaped, more a breath than a sound. Hide. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed. He didn't fall gracefully. He pitched forward like a felled tree, landing with a heavy, wet thud on the floor she had just mopped, a hair's breadth from her feet. For a full 10 seconds, Tessa was paralyzed. The open door let the storm rage inside. The man lay unconscious on her floor, bleeding. The word he'd spoken echoed in the sudden roaring silence of her mind. Hide. Not help. Not call a doctor. Hide. The word was a command, an implication of pursuit. It meant that whatever had done this to him was still out there. The voice of self-preservation shrieked at her to run, to leave him and lock herself in the kitchen, to call the sheriff. But she couldn't. She was looking at a dying man, and the only thing her body would let her do was move toward him. With a grunt of effort, she slammed the heavy door shut, plunging the diner back into dim quiet and through the deadbolt. The click echoed like a gunshot, a sound of finality. A choice had been made. She knelt beside him, her jeans immediately soaking up the puddle of rain and blood. The coppery smell was overwhelming. "Hey," she said, her voice shaking as she gently touched his uninjured shoulder. "Hey, can you hear me?" There was no response. His breathing was shallow, ragged. He was a big man, all lean muscle and bone, and she knew she couldn't leave him in the middle of the diner floor. If someone came looking, he would be the first thing they saw. Hide. Her gaze darted around the small diner. The kitchen was too open. The booths offered no real cover. Her eyes landed on the door behind the counter, the one marked storage. It was a cramped, windowless room filled with sacks of flour, canned goods, and cleaning supplies. It was perfect. Gritting her teeth, Tessa hooked her arms under his, planting her feet for leverage. He was a dead weight, far heavier than he looked. "Come on," she grunted, her own muscles straining. "You have to help me a little." She dragged him, his head lolling, his ruined suit jacket catching on the leg of a stool. The journey of 15 feet felt like a mile. She scraped his body through the doorway into the dry storage room, the smell of cardboard and old potatoes replacing the scent of blood. With a final desperate heave, she got him fully inside and slumped against a stack of flour sacks, her lungs burning. He lay sprawled on the concrete floor, a dark, broken shape in the gloom. She fumbled for the pull-cord light, and a single bare bulb flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across his face. Now, in the stark light, she could see the details. The suit wasn't just expensive, it was bespoke, fitting his powerful frame with an elegance that even the blood and rain couldn't entirely erase. On his wrist, peeking from a torn cuff, was a watch, a sliver of silver and black with a complex face. It wasn't a brand she recognized, but it whispered of a world where time was measured in thousands of dollars. His hands, though scraped and bruised, were clean, his nails immaculately cared for. This was no local. This was not someone who belonged in Havenwood. as she frantically rummaged for the diner's meager first aid kit, a plastic box of cartoon character bandages and antiseptic wipes. Her fingers brushed against something hard in his clenched fist. Gently, she pried his cold fingers open. Resting in his palm was a small, tightly woven silk brocade pouch, an omamori charm, its intricate gold and red threads stained dark with his blood. A man of violence and wealth clinging to a token of divine protection. She took the first aid kit and a stack of clean dish towels and knelt beside him again, her mind a whirlwind of fear and purpose. She didn't know his name. She didn't know who was after him or why. All she knew was that she had opened her door to a storm and let a war walk in. Tessa pressed a towel against the gash on his forehead, the touch feeling terrifyingly intimate. The storm outside had a voice, but the silence in the diner was now the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. It was the silence of a life that had just been irrevocably broken. And she wasn't sure if it was his or hers. The storage room had become a makeshift emergency ward, and Tessa was playing doctor with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The single bare bulb overhead cast harsh shadows across the stranger's unconscious face, making him look like a figure from a nightmare, or perhaps that's exactly what he was. She'd managed to prop him up against the flour sacks, his head tilted back at an uncomfortable angle. The blood from his temple wound had slowed to a sluggish trickle, but the real concern was his left arm. Through the shredded fabric of his suit jacket, she could see the telltale puncture wound of a bullet entry. No exit wound that she could find, which meant the bullet was still lodged somewhere inside. "What have I gotten myself into?" she whispered, pressing a fresh towel against his shoulder. The white cotton immediately bloomed crimson. The first aid kit was laughably inadequate cartoon bandages, meant for scraped knees, not gunshot wounds. She grabbed the bottle of hydrogen peroxide and poured it liberally over the wound. The liquid fizzed and bubbled, turning pink as it mixed with blood. The man's body tensed, a low groan escaping his lips, even in unconsciousness. "I'm sorry," Tessa said automatically, then caught herself. Why was she apologizing to someone who'd brought violence to her doorstep? Someone who'd told her to hide? She worked in silence for the next 20 minutes, using every clean towel she could find to create makeshift bandages. The storm continued its assault on the diner, the wind howling like a living thing trying to claw its way inside. Every few minutes, something would crash outside, a trash can, a tree branch, maybe pieces of someone's roof. Each sound made her jump, her eyes darting to the storage room door. She was tying off a bandage around his shoulder when his hand suddenly shot up, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes snapped open dark, alert, and completely focused, despite the pain he must have been feeling. "Where?" The word came out rough, gravelly. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're in a diner, the last stop. You collapsed." "No." His grip tightened slightly, not painful but insistent. "Where are we? What town?" "Havenwood. About 40 miles from the interstate." Something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, perhaps relief. His grip loosened, and he seemed to take in his surroundings properly for the first time. The storage room, the industrial shelving, the door that led back to the main diner. "Good," he murmured. "Remote. Good." He tried to sit up straighter and immediately winced, his free hand going to his shoulder. Tessa could see the moment he catalogued his injuries, the professional way he assessed the damage, like someone accustomed to violence and its aftermath. "You've been shot," she said unnecessarily. "The bullet's still in there. You need a hospital." "No hospitals." The words were sharp, definitive. "No police, no records. Listen, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but you could die without proper medical." "I've had worse." he shifted again, testing his mobility. The bullet missed the artery, or I'd already be dead. It's lodged in muscle tissue, painful but not immediately fatal. The clinical way he discussed his own gunshot wound sent a chill down Tessa's spine. This wasn't his first time. "Who are you?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes taking in every detail, her worn jeans, her diner uniform shirt with Tessa embroidered on the pocket, the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Someone who shouldn't be here," he finally said. "Someone who's putting you in danger just by breathing." He paused, grimacing as he adjusted his position. "I'm sorry for that." "That's not a name. Kazuo." He offered it like a confession. "And you're Tessa." He nodded toward her name tag. "Tessa, who works the night shift alone in a diner 40 miles from nowhere. Not the wisest choice for a young woman." "I manage fine on my own," she said defensively. "Usually, perhaps. Not tonight." Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the building's foundations. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. In that brief moment of darkness, Tessa saw something change in Kazuo's expression. A sharpening of attention, a predator's alertness. "They'll be checking the roads," he said, more to himself than to her. "The storm will slow them down, but not for long. They'll be methodical. Every building, every possible shelter." "Who's they?" He didn't answer, instead struggling to his feet. Tessa moved to help him, but he waved her off, using the wall for support. He was taller than she'd realized, maybe 6'2", and despite his injuries, he moved with a contained grace that spoke of training, discipline. "I need to see the layout," he said. "Exits, windows, blind spots." "You need to rest. You've lost a lot of blood." "I'll rest when I'm dead." He made it to the storage room door, peering out into the darkened diner. "Or when they are." Tessa followed him as he did a slow circuit of the diner, noting every detail. He paused at each window, checking sight lines, testing the locks. He examined the back exit that led to the dumpster area, frowning at the flimsy deadbolt. "This won't hold," he muttered. "Hold against what? Who's after you?" He turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw something almost like regret in his expression. "Men who won't hesitate to kill anyone who's helped me." "Which now includes you." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What? No, I was just helping someone who was hurt. I don't even know you." "That distinction won't matter to them." He moved to the front windows, staying in the shadows as he peered out into the storm-lashed parking lot. In their world, there are no innocent bystanders, only assets and obstacles. "Their world? What world? What are you, some kind of criminal?" He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either, just continued his surveillance. "You should leave," he said finally. "Get in your car, drive to the next town. Don't come back for a few days. This is my job, my life. I can't just—" A sound cut through the storm, the distant growl of an engine. Both of them froze. The sound grew closer, and through the rain-smeared windows, twin headlights appeared on the access road. "Get down!" Kazuo commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made her obey without thinking. They crouched behind the counter as the vehicle pulled into the parking lot. It was a police cruiser. Tessa started to stand. "It's just the cops. They sometimes check on the place during bad weather." Kazuo's hand on her arm stopped her. "No. Think. A welfare check in this storm? When they should be dealing with emergencies?" He shook his head. "They're checking everywhere. Someone's pulling strings." The cruiser's searchlight swept across the diner's windows, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. It lingered on the front door, then moved to illuminate the empty parking spots. "My car's out back," Tessa whispered. "Then you're working late?" Alone. Nothing unusual. He met her eyes, his gaze intense. Can you lie? Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, authoritative and demanding. Ma'am, this is Officer Bradley with the state police. We're checking on folks because of the storm. Tessa looked at Kazuo. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, his hand pressed against his wounded shoulder, but his eyes were clear, calculating. He nodded toward the door. Answer it, he said quietly. Be normal, be bored, be annoyed at the interruption, but whatever you do, don't let him inside. She stood on unsteady legs and walked to the door, each step feeling like she was walking toward her own doom. Through the glass, she could see Officer Bradley Young, clean-shaven, his uniform rain-soaked. She recognized him vaguely from his occasional stops for coffee. She opened the door just wide enough to speak through the gap, keeping the chain on. Hey, Officer Bradley. Hell of a night to be out. Yes, ma'am. Just checking that everyone's okay. Power's out in half the county. You doing all right here? Generator's holding up, she lied smoothly, surprising herself. Just cleaning up, waiting for the storm to pass before I head home. His eyes tried to peer past her into the darkened diner. You alone? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. From her peripheral vision, she saw Kazuo pressed against the wall, completely still, a shadow among shadows. Unless you count the ghosts, she said, forcing a laugh. Why? Something happened? There was an incident in the city. Some dangerous individuals might be heading this way. You see anyone unusual? Any strangers? You call 911 immediately. Will do. Her hand was steady on the door, though her heart was racing. Though I doubt anyone's crazy enough to be out in this except you guys. Officer Bradley smiled, seemed satisfied. Lock up tight, ma'am. The worst of the storm should pass by morning. She watched him walk back to his cruiser, the taillights disappearing into the rain. Only when they were completely gone did she close the door and slide down against it, her legs finally giving out. You did well, Kazuo said, emerging from the shadows. I just lied to a cop. For you. For someone I don't even know. Yes, he agreed simply. You did. She looked up at him, this stranger who'd brought danger to her door. Who are you really? And don't give me another non-answer. I think I deserve the truth after that. He was quiet for a long moment, then slowly lowered himself to sit on the floor across from her, his back against the counter. The storm raged on outside, but in here, in this moment, there was an odd intimacy in their shared space. The truth, he said softly, is that I'm someone who should be dead. The fact that I'm not means others will die instead. And now, because of your kindness, you're part of that equation. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now. He closed his eyes, and she could see the exhaustion hitting him. They'll be back. Not the police, the real hunters. And when they come, you'll need to make a choice. What choice? He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze directly. Whether a stranger's life is worth risking your own. The lights flickered again, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the diner, Tessa heard it. More engines. Not just one this time. Multiple vehicles, moving slowly, methodically. They were searching, and they were getting closer. The engines never came closer. After 20 agonizing minutes of waiting in the dark, listening to the distant rumble of vehicles moving through the storm, the sounds faded into the night. But the temporary reprieve did nothing to calm the knot of fear that had taken up permanent residence in Tessa's stomach. She'd moved Kazuo back into the storage room, helping him settle against the flour sacks once more. His breathing had grown more labored, and fresh blood had seeped through the makeshift bandages on his shoulder. He needed proper medical attention and antibiotics, possibly surgery. What he had instead was a terrified waitress with a first aid kit meant for paper cuts. "You're getting worse," she said, checking his forehead. He was burning up. Fever, of course. The wound's probably infected. You need a doctor, a hospital. And I've told you that's not possible. His voice was weaker now, the authority draining out of it along with his strength. "Then you'll die. Is that what you want? You survive whatever happened to you out there, only to die in a storage room surrounded by industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce?" Despite everything, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've imagined worse deaths. That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be." He shifted, wincing. "There's a phone number in my jacket pocket, inside left. Call it. Tell whoever answers that the crane has landed in Havenwood. They'll understand." Tessa hesitated, then reached for his ruined suit jacket, which she'd draped over a box earlier. The fabric was expensive. Even she could tell that some kind of silk blend, custom tailored. There was an inner pocket, and inside she found a phone. Not just any phone. It was one of those expensive models. The screen cracked but still functional. She also found something else, a business card, heavy stock, embossed with elegant script. She held it up to the light. Kazuo Takeda, Chief Executive Officer, Takeda International Holdings. There was a Tokyo address, a phone number, an email. It looked completely legitimate, the kind of card a businessman would hand out at corporate meetings. Takeda International Holdings, she read aloud. "That's you? You're a businessman?" "Among other things." He didn't meet her eyes. She turned the card over. On the back, handwritten in precise characters, was a different phone number. No name, no explanation. What kind of businessman gets shot and tells people to hide? She pulled out her own phone from her pocket. What kind of businessman has police and multiple vehicles searching for him in the middle of a storm? The complicated kind. "Stop giving me non-answers." The frustration finally boiled over. "I've lied to the police for you. I've hidden you, helped you, and apparently put my life in danger for you. The least you can do is tell me the truth. Who are you really?" Kazuo was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Then he sighed, a sound of deep weariness. "Have you ever heard of the Yakuza?" The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Tessa felt her blood run cold. "The Japanese mafia," she said slowly. "Like the actual mafia, organized crime." "Yes? And you're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't want to. "The Takeda-gumi is one of the oldest clans in Japan. My grandfather founded it after the war. My father expanded it, and I—" He paused. "I inherited it when he died 5 years ago." The storage room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. Tessa stood up, backing away from him. "You're a crime boss, a gang leader." "Kumicho," he corrected quietly. "Supreme boss. Or I was until 3 nights ago." "What happened 3 nights ago?" "A betrayal." The word came out bitter. "My Wakagashira, my second in command, decided that my leadership was too traditional, too bound by the old codes. He wanted to expand into territories and businesses that I refused to touch. Human trafficking, opioids, things that violate the code my grandfather established. So he tried to kill you. During a meeting that was supposed to negotiate a truce with a rival clan. He'd already bought off half my men. The ambush was well planned, professional." Kazuo's hand moved unconsciously to the omamori charm that Tessa had placed on the shelf beside him. "I should have died, would have died, if not for 3 men who stayed loyal. They got me out, but barely. We split up to draw off pursuit. I took one of the cars and drove. Just drove. When the bullet wound became too much, when I started to lose consciousness, I looked for shelter. And I found your diner. Tessa's mind was reeling. The man she'd been caring for wasn't just a criminal. He was the head of an entire criminal organization. He probably had blood on his hands, had ordered violence, had destroyed lives. How many people have you killed? The question came out before she could stop it. He met her gaze steadily. Directly, 7. Men who threatened my family, who violated our codes, who left me no choice. Indirectly, as the head of the clan, responsible for all our actions. He shook his head. I stopped counting. Does that number matter to you? Yes. No. I don't know. She ran her hands through her hair, pacing in the small space. This is insane. I should call the police. Turn you in. You're a criminal. You should, he agreed. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But you said they'd kill me anyway. Your enemies. Kenji, my former second, he can't afford loose ends, can't afford witnesses. Even if you turned me in, even if the police arrested me, he'd send someone for you eventually, just to be sure. Kazuo's voice was matter of fact, stating a simple truth. The moment you opened that door, the moment you helped me, you became part of this. I'm sorry for that, truly. Tessa felt tears of frustration burning her eyes. I was just trying to help someone, just being a decent human being. I know, and in my world, that kindness is the rarest and most dangerous thing. He leaned his head back against the flour sacks, exhaustion written across his features. Make the call. The number on the back of the card. Tell them what I said. They'll send someone to extract me. Once I'm gone, you might have a chance. If you leave town for a while, if you're careful, might have a chance. That's not exactly reassuring. It's the best I can offer. She looked at the phone in her hand, then at the business card, then at Kazuo. He looked nothing like the feared crime boss he claimed to be. He looked like a man in pain, feverish and wounded, at the end of his resources. Vulnerable. This Wakaga whatever, this Kenji, she said. Why did he betray you? Because he believes compassion is weakness. Because I refuse to let our clan become monsters. Because the old ways, the code, the honor, mean nothing to him compared to profit and power. Kazuo's eyes hardened. He's not wrong that the world is changing, but I won't change by abandoning everything my grandfather built, everything that separates us from common thugs. You're still criminals, still breaking the law. Yes. We operate in the shadows, gambling, protection, some smuggling, but there are lines we don't cross. Women and children are sacred. We don't poison communities with drugs. We honor our agreements. Our word means something. He met her eyes. I know how that sounds to you. A criminal with a code of honor. A contradiction. It is a contradiction. Perhaps, but it's all I have. Tessa was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Then she asked the question that had been nagging at her. The charm, the omamori. You were holding it when you collapsed. His hand closed around it reflexively. It was my father's. He carried it through his entire life as kumicho. Said it was blessed by a priest at Sensoji Temple in Tokyo. When he died, I took it. A superstition, maybe, but you're still alive when you shouldn't be. Yes. She made her decision. She didn't entirely understand it, couldn't fully justify it, but she made it anyway. She dialed the number on the back of the card. It rang 3 times before a male voice answered. No greeting, just silence, waiting. The crane has landed in Havenwood, Tessa said, feeling ridiculous. There was a sharp intake of breath. Kumicho? You have him? I'm the person who found him. He's hurt, badly, gunshot wound, fever. He needs medical. Put him on. She handed the phone to Kazuo. He took it, and his whole demeanor changed. He spoke in rapid Japanese, his voice regaining some of its strength, the tone commanding despite his condition. The conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes. When he handed the phone back to her, there was a man speaking English on the other end. Miss, my name is Ryota. I was Kumicho's personal guard. I failed to protect him during the attack. I am in your debt for preserving his life. I couldn't leave him bleeding on my floor. Many would have, most would have. There was a pause. I am 8 hours away by car, maybe 6 if I ignore traffic laws. Can you keep him safe until then? I don't know. There were people searching earlier, police, and maybe others. Kenji's men. They'll be thorough. Another pause. You should know what you're risking, what you've already risked. These men won't hesitate. I know. He told me. He told me everything. And you're still helping him? Apparently, I'm an idiot. She heard what might have been a laugh. Or a saint. Listen carefully. Do not use any credit cards. Do not call anyone else. Keep the lights low. If anyone comes to the door, anyone at all, you don't answer. I'll call when I'm close. What if he gets worse? What if the fever... There's a small pharmacy in Havenwood, yes? In the morning when it opens, buy antibiotics if you can. Amoxicillin, cephalexin, anything broad spectrum. Say it's for a sick relative. Also buy fever reducers, clean bandages, saline solution. Pay cash. I don't have much cash. There was a pause. Check Kumicho's jacket, inner right pocket. Tessa did. There was a money clip with what had to be at least $3,000 in hundreds. Oh my God! Use what you need. 6 hours, miss. Keep him alive for 6 hours, and I'll get him out of your life. The call ended. Tessa stood there holding the phone, looking at the unconscious crime boss slumped in her storage room, and wondered at what point in the last few hours her life had completely derailed. She checked her watch. It was 2:47 a.m. The pharmacy opened at 8. 6 hours until help arrived, assuming this Ryota wasn't caught or killed on his way here. She settled down next to Kazuo, keeping the lights dim, listening to the storm that still raged outside, and the more dangerous storm that was hunting them both. I must be out of my mind, she muttered. Kazuo's eyes flickered open briefly. Thank you, he whispered. And despite everything, the danger, the lies, the impossible situation, Tessa found herself saying, You're welcome. The storm howled its disapproval, but she stayed where she was, keeping watch over a man she should have feared, protecting someone who'd brought nothing but danger to her door. She'd made her choice. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. Dawn came like a reluctant witness, gray and grudging through the rain-streaked windows. The storm had exhausted itself to a steady drizzle, leaving behind a world of bent trees and scattered debris. Tessa hadn't slept. She'd spent the hours alternating between checking Kazuo's fever and peering through the blinds at the empty parking lot, waiting for the inevitable. At 5:30 a.m., she heard engines again. This time they didn't pass by. A sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Its windows tinted so dark they might as well have been painted. It moved with predatory slowness, circling the lot once before parking directly in front of the diner's entrance. The engine died, but no one got out. Not yet. Tessa's heart hammered as she crept back to the storage room. Kazuo was awake, already alert despite the fever that still burned in his eyes. How many? He asked quietly. 1 car, black sedan. They're just sitting there. He nodded, unsurprised. They're confirming the location, looking for signs of activity. He struggled to sit up straighter, his jaw tight with pain. Did you touch anything in the main dining area? Leave any traces that someone was here after closing? The floor was still wet when you arrived. Your blood, she swallowed. There might be traces. They'll see it. He was matter of fact, already past fear and into strategy. They'll know I was here. The question is whether they think I still am. A car door opened, then another. Tessa risked another look. 2 men had emerged from the sedan. They wore dark suits despite the early hour, perfectly tailored, perfectly pressed. One was older, maybe 50, with silver at his temples and the bearing of someone used to authority. The other was younger, built like a boxer, all coiled violence barely contained in expensive fabric. They didn't look like thugs. They looked like businessmen, which somehow made them more terrifying. The older one said something to the younger, who nodded and began circling the building while his partner approached the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Professional. Patient. Not the desperate pounding of someone fleeing for their life, but the measured rap of someone who expected to be answered. Miss, we know you're in there. We saw movement. Please, we just need to ask you a few questions. The voice was cultured, polite, with only the faintest trace of an accent. It could have belonged to a college professor or a diplomatic attaché. Tessa looked at Kazuo, who shook his head sharply. Don't answer. Miss Johnson, Tessa, isn't it? We're not here to hurt you. We're looking for someone. A dangerous individual who may have come this way. We're concerned he might have threatened you, forced you to help him. The use of her name sent ice through her veins. They knew who she was, had probably known before they even arrived. My associate is checking the perimeter, the voice continued, conversational. He'll see your car in the back. He'll notice the blood traces by the door that someone tried very hard to clean. These things tell a story, Miss Johnson, a story that could end badly or well, depending on what happens in the next few minutes. Kazuo had moved. Silently, despite his injuries, he'd positioned himself behind the storage room door. In his hand was a knife. Where had he gotten a knife? From the kitchen supplies, she realized. While she'd been watching the window, he'd been preparing. The younger man appeared at the window near the storage area, cupping his hands to peer inside. Tessa and Kazuo both froze. The man's gaze swept the visible area, lingered on the coffee maker still full from the night before, the clean counters, the empty booths. Shimada-san, he called in accented English. Blood traces in the back. Recent. The older man, Shimad. Miss Johnson, please. Let's discuss this like civilized people. Open the door. Tessa made a decision. Not a brave one, but the only one that made sense. She walked to the front door, ignoring Kazuo's sharp intake of breath behind her. But she didn't open it. She spoke through the glass. We're closed. Come back at 7. Shimada smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. I admire your composure, Miss Johnson. Most people would be terrified right now, but you're standing there, talking to me through a locked door, pretending everything is normal. That takes courage. Or perhaps you've seen enough to know that fear won't help you. I don't know what you want. I think you do. A man came here last night, wounded, desperate. He probably told you he was a businessman, or perhaps he told you nothing at all. But you helped him anyway, because you're compassionate. That compassion is admirable, but it's also placed you in danger. No one came here. The blood by your back door suggests otherwise. A deer, Tessa said, surprising herself with the lie. Hit by a car in the storm, stumbled back there and died. I had to call animal control. Shimada's smile widened slightly. Animal control. At 2 in the morning. during the worst storm in 5 years. I left a message. Of course you did. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately showing he wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a photograph and held it up to the glass. It was Kazuo, not wounded and desperate, but powerful and commanding, wearing a perfect suit at what looked like a formal event. The family resemblance was unmistakable. This man is Kazuo Takeda, Shimada said. He's responsible for numerous criminal enterprises. He's dangerous, violent, and desperate. If he's here, if you're protecting him, you're not helping a victim. You're harboring a killer. I told you, no one. Let me paint you a picture. Miss Johnson, Shimada's voice hardened slightly. You're a good person. You work hard. You keep to yourself. You moved here 2 years ago from Baltimore, running from something, an ex-boyfriend, perhaps, a bad situation. You thought you'd found peace in this little town, but now you're caught up in something you don't understand, something that will destroy that peace forever. The fact that he knew where she'd come from, how long she'd been here, made her knees weak, but she kept her voice steady. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Kazuo Takeda is going to die. That's not a threat, it's a fact. The only variable is who dies with him. His loyal dogs who still follow him blindly? Almost certainly. The innocent woman who was just trying to help? That depends entirely on the next few minutes. The younger man had returned from his circuit of the building. He whispered something in Japanese to Shimada, who nodded. My associate confirms there's no vehicle but yours, which means our friend is either on foot, unlikely given his injuries, or someone picked him up, or... He met Tessa's eyes through the glass. He's still here, hiding, waiting, putting you in terrible danger by his very presence. I want you to leave. Soon. But first, I'm going to give you something. He produced a business card, holding it up. This has my direct number. When you realize the position you're in, when you understand that protecting a Yakuza boss will only end in your death, you'll call me. I'll give you a way out, safety, protection, maybe even a reward. All you have to do is tell me where he is. He placed the card on the ground by the door and stepped back. We'll leave now. But Miss Johnson will be watching. Every car that comes to this diner, every person you talk to, every move you make, and when Kazuo Takeda shows himself, and he will, because injured animals always break cover eventually, we'll be ready. Shimada turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the men coming to help him? The ones he called? We know about them too. This highway is the only route to Havenwood. We've established checkpoints. They won't make it. The two men got back in their sedan. The engine started with a purr of expensive German engineering. They pulled out slowly, almost casually, and disappeared down the rain-slicked road. Tessa stood frozen at the door for a full minute before her legs gave out and she sank to the floor. She was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. Kazuo emerged from the storage room, moving carefully, the knife still in his hand. His fever-bright eyes were focused, calculating. They know Ryota is coming, he said. They know everything, about me, about Baltimore, about... She couldn't finish. Kenji was always thorough. He moved to the window, staying in the shadows as he watched the road. They'll have researched everyone in town the moment they traced me here. Your background, your patterns, your vulnerabilities. They know I'm from Baltimore. They know why I left. What happened in Baltimore? She laughed bitterly. Does it matter? I ran from one dangerous situation right into another. It matters because they'll use it against you. She was quiet for a moment, then, my ex, he was controlling, violent toward the end. I worked at a restaurant there, and one night he came in during my shift, drunk, angry. There was an incident. The police got involved. I testified against him, got a restraining order, but he had friends, other cops who thought I was making trouble for a good guy. I started getting pulled over all the time, tickets for nothing, harassment. So I left, changed my name legally back to my grandmother's maiden name, started over here. And now they know all of that. They'll use it to find me, won't they? If I run. They have resources, connections. Yes. He moved away from the window, lowering himself carefully onto one of the booth seats. I've destroyed your life, your fresh start, your safety, all because you opened a door. Stop. Just stop. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I need to think. The pharmacy opens in 90 minutes. You need to go. Get the antibiotics, the supplies. Act normal, like nothing has happened. How can I act normal? They're watching. Because if you don't, they'll know for certain I'm here. Right now, they suspect. They're confident, but not certain. That doubt is the only thing keeping them from storming in here. What about your man, Ryota? They said they have checkpoints. Ryota is many things, but he's not stupid. He'll know something's wrong when he gets close. He'll find another way. Kazuo's voice carried more confidence than his expression suggested. But we need to buy time. I need to get stronger. And we need to plan. Plan what? How to die? Because that seems like where this is heading. Plan how to survive. His dark eyes met hers. I've been in worse situations. Really? Wounded, feverish, hunted, trapped in a diner with no backup and an innocent civilian to protect? You've been in worse than this? He considered for a moment. No, he admitted. This is probably the worst. Despite everything, Tessa almost laughed. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. Get some rest, she said finally. I'll go to the pharmacy when it opens. Play the concerned waitress buying supplies for her sick grandmother or something. Grandmother? It sounds better than wounded Yakuza boss hiding in my storage room. This time he did smile, just slightly. Thank you, Tessa, for all of this. I know you have no reason to help me. No, I don't. But I'm in it now, aren't I? Shimada made that clear. Whether you're here or gone, I'm marked. I'll protect you, I swear it. She looked at him feverish, wounded, hunted, and wondered how he could protect anyone, including himself. But she nodded anyway. Because what else could she do? The gray dawn light filled the diner, and somewhere out there, predators waited. The clock on the wall ticked toward 7, toward the pharmacy opening, toward whatever came next. Tessa picked up Shimada's business card from outside the door. She didn't throw it away. She put it in her pocket, next to Kazuo's knife that she'd taken when he wasn't looking. Because in the end, she'd learned in Baltimore, and was learning again now. Sometimes the only person who could save you was yourself. The days following Evian's visit to Morello's were a blur. Tulip moved through them like she was floating, disconnected from everything around her. She couldn't shake the conversation they'd had. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see his dark eyes studying her, feel the weight of his words pressing on her chest. He was offering her a life of power, wealth, and security, but at what cost? Her mind was a battlefield on one side, her desire for the simple life she'd always known, on the other, the reality of the world Evian had shown her. A world of power, danger, and ultimately choice. It was like he was offering her the world, but she knew she would never be able to walk away from it unscathed. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her mother, her family's hidden legacy, and the dangerous web she was now tangled in. She spent every free moment she had trying to sort through her feelings. Could she really walk away from everything? Her heart ached at the thought of abandoning her mother and the quiet life she had built. But the truth was undeniable. Evian was right. She was already a part of this world, whether she accepted it or not. But even as she faced this bitter reality, a part of her still clung to hope that maybe she could figure out a way to remain untouched by it all, that she could somehow separate herself from the power that pulled at her like a gravitational force. She had to believe that there was a way out. That Friday evening the restaurant was packed. It was a rare occasion when the entire room seemed to hum with excitement, the air thick with the anticipation of something big. Tulip moved from table to table, performing her duties with automatic precision. The warmth of the room, the laughter and chatter of the customers, all seemed distant. Her mind kept drifting back to Evian. She couldn't escape him. At 9 p.m., as if on cue, he appeared. He had become a fixture in her life now, a shadow that loomed over her every move. He wasn't alone tonight, and for a moment Tulip hesitated. She wasn't used to seeing him with anyone else. The people with him, a pair of sharply dressed men who stood like bodyguards, seemed to radiate a different kind of energy, cold, calculated. Their eyes scanned the room, alert, as if assessing the threat in every person they passed. Evian, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease. He moved with the same grace and authority he always had, his presence commanding the space without him needing to say a word. As his gaze found hers across the room, she couldn't help but feel the familiar pull, that undeniable magnetism that made it impossible for her to ignore him. He caught her eye and nodded slightly, and Tulip's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a chance encounter. He wanted something. He wanted to talk to her again. And once again, Tulip felt like she had no choice but to respond. She excused herself from the table she was attending and made her way toward the corner booth where Evian was seated, the same place where everything had shifted for her. When she reached the booth, she could feel the tension between them like a live wire. It was thick in the air, charging everything around them. Evian looked up at her, his expression unreadable. There was no warmth in his gaze, no acknowledgement of the weight they both carried. He was simply waiting for her to sit. Without a word, she slid into the booth opposite him, her pulse quickening despite herself. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly, but there was no accusation in his voice, just an observation, a fact. "I've been busy," she replied, her voice almost too casual. She wasn't ready for this conversation. Not yet. But somehow, she knew it was inevitable. Evian leaned back, his fingers lightly tracing the rim of his wineglass. "We need to talk, Tulip, about your future, about the choices you're making." The words sent a ripple of anxiety through her chest. "I've made no choice," she replied, her voice tight. "I'm just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with all this." "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." His voice remained steady, but there was something in his eyes, a glint of steel, that made her uncomfortable. "You're already in this, Tulip. You've been in it since the day you were born." She clenched her fists in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to be told she had no choice. But Evian's words rang true, and it made her angry. "I'm just a waitress," she said, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. "I don't want to be part of whatever world you think I belong to." Evian smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're already part of it. You can't escape it no matter how hard you try. Your family's past is tied to mine. That necklace you wear, that's your inheritance. You can try to run from it, but it will always catch up to you." Tulip felt the floor shift beneath her. "No," she whispered, the word escaping her before she could stop it. "No, this can't be happening. I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said, his tone softer now, but still unyielding. "But it's the truth. And the sooner you accept it, the sooner we can move forward." She shook her head, trying to grasp onto something familiar, something real. "I don't know how. I don't even know what you want from me. I don't understand any of this." Evian leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not asking you to understand. I'm asking you to accept that you have a place in this world, a place that's been there all along. Your grandmother made her choices. She chose to leave this world behind, but now it's your turn to make yours." Her heart pounded. "And what are my options?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Evian's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You have two options, Tulip. You can walk away from me and from everything. Continue your life as a waitress, but I won't be able to protect you. Your family's ties to mine are deep. There are people who would come after you, after your mother, and I won't be able to stop them." Tulip's stomach tightened at the thought. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she could take care of herself, that she didn't need his protection. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had no control over what was happening. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, and her family's legacy was the reason why. "And the other option?" she asked, her voice hollow. He leaned in closer, his voice soft, but the weight of his words made her heart race. "You accept the life I'm offering. You join me, accept your place in my world. And I'll protect you. I'll make sure you have everything you've ever wanted, power, wealth, security. All of it will be yours, Tulip, but you'll have to let go of the life you thought you had." Her breath caught in her throat. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of the decision. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't asked for any of it. But in that moment, as she sat across from Evian, she realized that no matter what she did, she was already tied to him. Her family's past, her grandmother's choices, they had already set her on a path she couldn't undo. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Evian's expression softened, just slightly, though the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "You don't have to decide now," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "But when you're ready, we'll talk. I'm not going anywhere. And neither is your family's legacy." Tulip stared at him, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. She felt trapped. But somehow the more he spoke, the more she realized that she had already made the first step toward this world. The decision wasn't truly hers anymore. As Evian stood up to leave, he paused and looked at her once more. "Remember, Tulip," he said softly, his voice carrying an edge of finality, "this world won't wait forever, and neither will I." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Tulip sitting in the booth, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and reluctant acceptance. Tulip could no longer deny the pull. The nights she spent trying to escape the thought of Evian, the choice he'd offered her, the cold reality of her family's past, all of it had come crashing down on her in ways she couldn't ignore. Every glance in the mirror reminded her of the necklace around her neck, a silent testament to the legacy she couldn't outrun. She had tried to go through her days as if everything were normal, to compartmentalize her work, her role as a caretaker for her mother, but she was failing. There was no normal anymore. It wasn't just the grand gestures of the mafia world Evian had dragged her into, or even the wealth and security he promised. It was the subtle, dangerous lure of power, the way it seemed to seep into every conversation, every glance, every small, measured action he took. Tulip had tried at first to ignore him, to pretend that he didn't hold her future in his hands, but the more she resisted, the more she felt drawn into his orbit. The deeper she went, the harder it became to stay away. It had been 2 days since their last conversation, 2 days since Evian had laid the truth bare before her. 2 days of pretending everything was fine at the restaurant, smiling at guests, filling drink orders, all the while her mind kept coming back to the same dark thought. What now? When Evian called her again, she couldn't bring herself to say no. The phone rang late in the afternoon. Tulip had just finished her shift and was about to check in with her mother when she saw the name flash across her screen. Evian, she whispered to herself, feeling the tension tighten in her chest. Her stomach fluttered uncomfortably, but she took a deep breath and answered, keeping her voice steady. Hello? Tulip. His voice came through, smooth and calm as always. I'd like to see you. There was something in his tone that made her heart race, something she couldn't quite place. She was tempted to say no, to tell him she wasn't ready, but the words didn't come. Instead, she found herself responding, When? Meet me at the usual place. I'll be waiting for you. The call ended abruptly, leaving her no chance to protest. The usual place. The corner booth at Morello's. Her heart sank, and with it, her resolve. She wasn't sure what to expect. She'd never been good at navigating this world. And yet here she was, caught between the life she thought she knew and the one she was being drawn into. Tulip pushed the uncomfortable feeling down and made her way to the restaurant. As she arrived, her footsteps echoed through the empty halls, the stillness amplifying the unease in her chest. The restaurant was closed for now, its polished floors gleaming under the dim lights. Morello's always felt different when the crowds weren't there. Without the buzz of conversations and laughter, it was just another empty space, a stark contrast to the polished mask the restaurant wore when the wealthy guests were seated. Evian was already there, seated in the same corner booth. He looked as if he had been waiting for hours, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert, scanning the room as he took in every detail. He looked up when she approached, the corners of his mouth lifting in a subtle smile. "Good evening, Tulip," he said, his voice smooth, like the finest silk. He didn't rise to greet her, as most men would have. Evian never needed to rise. His presence alone was enough to command attention. "I was hoping you'd come." Tulip felt a twinge of frustration mixed with something else, something she didn't want to name. "You don't give anyone much of a choice, do you?" Evian's smile never wavered, but there was a dangerous edge to it now, a sharpness that made Tulip pause. "Choice is an illusion, Tulip. You should know that by now." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. It wasn't the first time he had said something that sent a chill down her spine, but this time she couldn't brush it off. "Is that what you think?" she asked, trying to mask the unease in her voice. "That I have no choice?" Evian's gaze darkened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I think you're running from the inevitable," he said, his voice low, almost like a growl. "And that's a mistake. You're a part of my world, Tulip, whether you admit it or not. It's not about whether you choose to be here. You already are." The words hung in the air, thick with implication. Tulip wanted to protest, to tell him that she was just a waitress, just a woman trying to get by, but somehow his words felt true. She didn't know how, but she felt it deep down. She was already tangled in this world. There was no getting out. Evian continued, his voice soothing, almost gentle now. "I'm not asking you to fight it, Tulip. I'm asking you to embrace it. I'm offering you everything: protection, power, a future where you never have to worry about your mother's health or finances again. All of it can be yours." Tulip's breath caught in her throat. She had tried to resist, to turn away from the reality of what he was offering. But now, the weight of his words settled on her like a blanket of inevitability. "You're offering me everything," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But what do you want in return?" Evian smiled, his expression unreadable. "I don't want anything, Tulip. Not yet. I just want you to understand that in this world, loyalty is everything. And you've already pledged your loyalty, whether you realize it or not. Your family's ties to mine go back years. Your grandmother was one of my most trusted allies. Tulip's chest tightened. I don't even know who I am anymore. All I wanted was a normal life. Normal is a fantasy, Evian said, leaning forward, his gaze intense. And you're no longer living in a fantasy, Tulip. You're living in the reality of your family's legacy, and you have a choice. You can either accept it and join me, or you can fight it. But know this, the consequences of fighting are severe. Your family, your mother, everything you've worked for, it could all be taken away in an instant. His words stung, but deep down, Tulip knew he wasn't lying. She had seen enough of his world, the cold, calculating nature of the power he wielded. It wasn't a world for the faint of heart. It was a world of survival, where the strong thrived and the weak were crushed beneath the weight of ambition. She swallowed hard, trying to calm the storm raging inside her. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice small. Evian's smile softened, and for a moment his expression seemed almost tender. I want you to trust me. I want you to see that I can offer you everything. I want you to accept your place in my world, Tulip. She could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of his offer. It wasn't just about the power or the wealth, it was about the protection, the security. For her mother, for herself. But the price was steep. The cost was her soul. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered, her voice trembling. Evian's eyes darkened again, and this time there was a chill in the air between them. You don't have to trust me, but you will need me, and you'll come to understand that everything I do for your own good. Tulip looked at him, her mind racing, her heart torn between fear and longing. She didn't want to admit it, but she knew deep down there was no going back. This was the life she had been born into. This was her inheritance. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Evian stood, his towering presence looming over her, but his smile was gentle. Think fast, Tulip. Time is something neither of us has much of. As he turned and walked away, Tulip remained in the booth, staring at the empty space where he had been. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had crossed a line. She had stepped into his world, and there was no turning back. The days after that night felt like a fog had descended upon Tulip's life. Her shifts at the restaurant were mechanical, the faces of the guests blurring together as she moved through her duties. The plates, the orders, the drinks, none of it mattered anymore. Every movement felt like it was made by someone else, as if she were a stranger trapped in her own body. What had happened to her? What had she become? The moment Evian had walked out of the restaurant that night, leaving her alone with the weight of his words, everything shifted. She had tried to cling to the remnants of the life she had once known. But deep down, she understood that life was gone. Her family's legacy, her grandmother's connection to Evian's criminal empire, was too strong. The necklace, the one that had been passed down through generations, was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a marker, a symbol of her connection to a world of danger and power. And as much as she wanted to escape it, she couldn't. It was already a part of her, and it was starting to seep into her bones. The fear was always there, lurking beneath the surface. The fear of what might happen if she didn't accept Evian's offer. He had made it clear if she chose to fight, there would be consequences. Her mother, the one person she still cared about, was vulnerable. Every day she spent in this world of shadows, the stakes grew higher. Tulip stared at the reflection of herself in the mirror one evening after a shift, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She had no idea what she was looking at. She didn't recognize herself anymore. the bright-eyed, hopeful woman who had walked into Morello's months ago, was gone. In her place stood someone who had already made a deal with the devil and was now trying to come to terms with it. Her thoughts drifted back to her grandmother. Victoria had always been such a steady presence in her life, and yet the truth of who she was had been hidden from her, buried under layers of silence. Why hadn't she told Tulip? Why had she chosen to leave this legacy in the dark, only for it to be thrust upon her granddaughter? It was a legacy built on fear, power, and control, and now it was Tulip's burden to carry. The weight of the decision she had to make settled deeper into her chest. She had tried to resist, to hold on to the life she'd built as a waitress and caretaker. But Evian was right. She wasn't just anyone. Her bloodline was tied to this world, and no amount of resistance could change that. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her reverie. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the warehouse. I'm expecting you." Tulip's stomach turned. The warehouse. She'd been there before, but it felt different now. The last time she had walked in there, she had left with more than just the memory of a conversation. She had left with the knowledge that her life would never be the same again. What did Evian want now? The thought of going there, of walking deeper into his world, filled her with a mixture of dread and something else, something she couldn't quite name. Part of her wanted to refuse, to say no, to turn around and walk away from this madness. But another part of her, one she didn't want to acknowledge, knew that she couldn't, not anymore. With a sense of inevitability, she grabbed her coat and headed toward the car. The warehouse stood in stark contrast to the elegant restaurants and boutiques she was used to seeing in the city. It was tucked away in an industrial area on the outskirts of town, far from the well-lit streets she frequented. The building looked old, its rusted steel beams groaning under the weight of years of neglect. The windows were dark, and the only light came from the flickering street lamps lining the perimeter of the building. Tulip's heart raced as she parked her car a few feet from the entrance. For a moment she hesitated. The door to the warehouse stood open, an eerie silence hanging in the air. It was as if the building was waiting for her. Tulip took a deep breath, fighting the rising panic in her chest, and stepped out of the car. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, the shadows long and stretching across the concrete floor. The scent of dust and old machinery filled the air, and the sound of her footsteps echoed off the high walls as she made her way inside. Her pulse quickened, each step bringing her closer to something she couldn't understand. And then, in the far corner of the room, she saw him. Evian. He was standing with his back to her, talking to a man Tulip didn't recognize. The man was tall, with dark, intimidating features, dressed in black from head to toe. There was an air of danger about him, the kind that made Tulip's stomach tighten with unease. Evian turned when he heard her approach. His eyes found hers immediately, a small smile playing on his lips. "Tulip," he greeted her, his voice low and calm. But there was an edge to it that made her shiver. "I'm glad you came." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I wasn't sure what this was about. What do you need from me?" Evian's gaze softened for a moment, though the intensity never left his eyes. "I need you to understand something. Everything I've offered you, everything I've promised, it's not just a gift. It's an investment." "An investment?" Tulip repeated, her voice shaking. "What do you mean?" He took a step closer to her, his movements deliberate, controlled. "Everything in this world comes with a price. You can't have power, wealth, security, without understanding that it comes with a responsibility, with loyalty." His voice dropped to a whisper. "With blood." Tulip's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what he was saying. This wasn't just about her being part of his world. It wasn't just a matter of accepting the life he was offering. It was about loyalty, about power, and about making a choice she hadn't yet been willing to make. Evian turned and nodded toward the man standing in the corner. The man stepped forward, his face hard and emotionless. He extended a hand to her, revealing a small black box. "Take it," Evian said softly. "It's time you fully accept what you are." Tulip looked at the box, her breath catching in her throat. She knew what this was, the final step, the point of no return. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's the key to your place in this world," Evian answered, his tone final. "Your initiation, your bond to me and everything I offer. Take it, and you will be mine, Tulip. You will belong to this world, and I will protect you." The man placed the box in her hands. The cool metal of the box felt heavy, the weight of it pressing down on her as if the decision was already made for her. For a moment, she hesitated, but the pressure in the room was overwhelming, the weight of her family's legacy, Evian's words, everything pulling her forward. Slowly, she opened the box, and inside she found a small, ornate key. Tulip's fingers trembled as she held it, the realization sinking in that this was more than just a symbol. This was a contract, a commitment, a mark of her place in a world she had never wanted, but one that was now inescapable. Evian's voice broke through her thoughts again. "Take the key, Tulip. Accept your place. You belong here now." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. With shaking hands, she closed the box, slipping the key into her pocket. She felt the weight of it there, a constant reminder of the choice she had made, or the one that had been made for her. As she looked up at Evian, something inside her shifted. There was no going back. This was her world now, whether she was ready or not. Evian gave her a small smile, a smile that seemed almost kind. "You'll understand soon enough, Tulip. This world, this life, it's everything you never knew you needed." Tulip sat alone in her apartment, the faint hum of the city outside her window doing little to soothe the storm inside her. She had never felt so far from herself, so completely adrift in a world she hadn't chosen. The weight of the small key Evian had given her seemed to press down on her chest, a constant reminder of the decision she hadn't yet fully made. Her fingers brushed the edge of the key, which she had placed in the drawer by her bed. It had been 2 days since that night at the warehouse. 2 days since she had taken the key from Evian's hand and sealed her fate in a way that seemed too final to undo. When she had returned from the warehouse, her body had been trembling with a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and something darker, something she wasn't yet ready to confront. Since then, she had been unable to escape the thoughts that clouded her mind. She had told herself over and over that she would not go back to Evian's world, that she would find a way to break free from the chains of her family's legacy. But the truth was, the deeper she looked, the less she understood where she could run to. Her mother's illness had drained her emotionally, leaving her fragile and vulnerable. But the arrival of Evian had shattered that facade. No longer was she just a waitress struggling to make ends meet. She was part of something much larger now, something dangerous, powerful, and far-reaching. The realization made her stomach churn. She had hoped that once she returned the key, once she told him that she wasn't ready to accept this life, Evian would release her, would allow her to walk away from the past that he kept pulling her toward. But deep down, she knew that wasn't how this world worked. There was no walking away. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping her out of her thoughts. Her hand moved almost instinctively to pick it up, her heart sinking when she saw the familiar number, Evian. It had only been 2 days, and yet his presence felt like an ever-present shadow hanging over her. She couldn't ignore him forever. With a deep breath, she answered the call. "Hello?" "Tulip." Evian's voice was calm, smooth, as always, but there was an undertone of something more. something she couldn't quite place. "I think it's time we talk." Her heart skipped a beat. There was no mistaking what he meant. She had put this off long enough, but the time had come. She had to face the reality of her situation. She wasn't going to be allowed to simply walk away. "I've been thinking," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need more time." Evian's voice softened. "Time is a luxury we don't have. You know that, don't you?" Tulip closed her eyes, her breath hitching in her throat. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You say I don't have a choice, but this life, it's not mine. I can't just—" "You already have chosen," Evian interrupted, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Whether you like it or not, you're already a part of this world, Tulip. Your family's legacy, your bloodline, it's tied to mine. There is no going back." The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wanted to fight, to shout that she could still leave, that she could walk away from all of this. But the truth was inescapable. She had already stepped into his world, and it was a world that didn't allow anyone to walk away unscathed. She let out a long breath, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "What do you want from me, Evian?" Her voice cracked slightly, and she hated herself for it. But there was no denying it. She was scared, more than she had ever been in her life. "What do you expect me to do?" "I want you to accept your place," Evian replied, his voice dropping to a softer, almost tender tone. "I want you to stop running from what you are, Tulip. You've already chosen me by accepting the key. Now it's time to make the final decision. You can either step fully into my world, with everything it offers, power, security, wealth, or you can resist and live in fear." Tulip's chest tightened. The choice seemed simple on the surface, power or fear, but there was so much more beneath it. Her mother's health, her past, her own soul, everything she had ever known was being weighed on the scales against everything Evian offered. "You've already taken the first step," Evian continued. "You took the key. You chose to come here, to stay in my world. Now it's just a matter of accepting it fully. You'll have protection, Tulip. You'll have the kind of life your mother deserves, a future where you don't have to worry. I can give you all of that. I can give you more than you could ever have imagined." Tulip's heart raced. There it was again, the allure of everything Evian promised. Protection, safety, a future for her mother. But at what cost? She had already taken one step into this world, but stepping further into it meant more than just accepting power. It meant accepting the price of her loyalty, her soul, her very identity. She remained silent for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Her emotions were a tangled mess of fear, doubt, and longing. She wanted to say yes, to embrace the life Evian offered. She wanted to say no, to turn her back on everything and fight for the life she thought she could have. But the truth kept creeping in, undeniable and unrelenting. The decision wasn't really hers to make. It never had been. I don't know if I can do this," Tulip whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be." Evian's voice softened, though there was still a firmness to it that gave her no room to argue. "You don't have to be anyone else, Tulip. You are who you are, and that's enough. You don't need to fight it. I can give you everything you've ever wanted, but you have to make the choice to accept it, to stop resisting what's already inside you." Tulip closed her eyes, her breath shaky, the weight of his words pressed down on her, suffocating her. She had already made her choice. She had taken the key. She had stepped into his world, and now there was no way back. "What happens if I don't accept?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Evian was silent for a long moment, the pause stretching on as if he were weighing his words carefully. Then you will live a life of fear, a life where you always look over your shoulder, never knowing who's watching. And you will have no protection, Tulip. No one to keep you safe. Your family, your mother. They will be exposed, vulnerable. Tulip felt a chill race down her spine. She couldn't live with that. She couldn't live with the fear of what might happen to her mother, to the people she loved. Please don't make me choose, she whispered, the words slipping from her lips before she could stop them. Evian's voice softened. I'm not asking you to choose, Tulip. I'm asking you to accept what's already been chosen for you. You have a place in this world. And you can either accept it and live without fear, or you can fight it and risk losing everything. The line had been drawn. There was no way back. Tulip's heart hammered in her chest as she made the hardest decision of her life. The life she had known, simple, ordinary, was gone. She let out a shaky breath, the weight of it all settling in. Okay, she said, her voice small, barely above a whisper. I'll accept it. Evian's silence was the longest she had ever felt. Then, as though he had expected nothing less, he finally spoke. You made the right choice, Tulip. The decision had been made. Tulip felt the weight of her choice settling over her like a heavy cloak. The words still echoed in her mind. I'll accept it. It had been the hardest thing she'd ever said, and yet, now that it was out there, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Regret wasn't something she could afford, not in this world. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Evian's world was one of constant movement, of shadows and whispers, where power flowed through every action and every conversation. It was a world she hadn't known existed, a world that had always been just beneath the surface of the life she had lived. But now it was her world too. Each day she spent with Evian was a mix of awe, fear, and something she couldn't quite name. There was a power in him, in the way he moved through life, as if everything bent to his will. People deferred to him without question, and Tulip saw how his mere presence changed the atmosphere of any room. It was magnetic, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. In the beginning, Tulip struggled to adjust. She wasn't used to the constant flow of information, the decisions that came with the kind of power Evian held. He had brought her into his fold, taught her how to move in his world, and shown her what it meant to live without fear. But it wasn't just about protection. It was about control, and she was learning that more and more with each passing day. There were days when she felt like a stranger in her own life, when she looked in the mirror and saw a woman she didn't recognize. The waitress who had once smiled at patrons, who had worked hard to make ends meet, was gone. In her place was someone different, someone who now sat at the table with men like Evian, making decisions that affected lives, who was being molded by the power she had once feared. Tulip had never imagined herself as part of this world. She had never wanted to be, but now, with each passing day, it became clearer that this world was hers as much as it was Evian's. She was bound to it, tied by blood, by legacy, and by the key she had accepted. One evening, as Tulip sat in one of the luxurious suites Evian had arranged for her, she stared out over the city. The skyline glittered below her, the lights dancing like stars on the horizon. She had everything she could ever want now: money, security, status. It was a dream come true, and yet it didn't feel like one. Evian had kept his word. He had given her the world, and he had protected her mother. Catherine was receiving the best care, the best treatments, things Tulip could never have afforded before. The comfort of knowing her mother was safe made everything feel worthwhile, but that didn't erase the dark feeling in her chest. The hollow feeling that came every time she thought about how she had gotten here. Her phone buzzed beside her, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced down and saw the familiar name, Evian. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been a few days since their last conversation, since she had made the choice to step fully into his world. She pressed the button to answer, her breath catching in her throat. "Hello?" "Tulip." Evian's voice was as smooth as ever, but there was something in it today that she couldn't place, something urgent. "I need you to meet me. We have work to do." Her stomach tightened. "Work? What kind of work?" "Don't worry about the details," he replied with a calm she couldn't ignore. "Just meet me in an hour. The usual place." The usual place. Morello's. The place where it all began. The place where her life had shifted irreparably. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone, her mind racing. The usual place, Evian always used that phrase. It was almost like a marker, an unspoken agreement that they were entering his world together. But every time she stepped into that world, it became harder to leave. And she wasn't sure she wanted to anymore. The ride to Morello's felt different this time. Her hands gripped the wheel, her knuckles white with tension. She had embraced this life, but how far would it go? Where did the line between protection and control blur? Every choice she had made so far had been tied to one thing, Evian. And she wasn't sure what would happen when the power that flowed through him found its way into her. The restaurant was as bustling as ever when she arrived. The rich and powerful crowded the tables, their voices blending into a symphony of business deals and idle chatter. Tulip barely noticed the noise now. Her focus was always on Evian. She stepped through the door, immediately aware of his presence in the room. He sat at the corner booth, a familiar place for them both. He wasn't alone this time. There were two men with him, both impeccably dressed, both exuding the same intimidating aura that Evian carried with him. The moment she stepped into view, Evian's eyes found hers. He gave her a slight nod, signaling for her to join them. She walked to the booth, her heart racing. As she slid into the seat opposite him, she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, a look that made her feel both powerful and insignificant at the same time. "Sit," he said, his tone commanding, but not unkind. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with curiosity. Evian smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "It's about you, Tulip. About your place in all of this." Tulip swallowed, her throat dry. "I've made my place," she said quietly. "I'm in this world now, aren't I?" "Yes," Evian said, his voice smooth. "But now you need to understand what it really means to be a part of my world. It's not just about accepting the power, it's about using it, about knowing when to move, when to strike, and when to hold back." Tulip's brow furrowed. "Move? Strike? I thought you were protecting me." "I am," he replied, his tone suddenly serious. "But protection isn't just about keeping you safe. It's about ensuring that no one harms you, no one dares to take what's yours. And in this world, everything is a fight. You can't afford to be weak, Tulip. You can't afford to be passive." Her heart pounded in her chest. This was a world of constant tension, constant conflict. She hadn't realized how deep Evian's world really went, how much it demanded of those who lived in it. The men beside Evian exchanged looks before one of them spoke. "We need her to be more than just an accessory," he said, his voice low but direct. "She's not just a part of this world, she's a force. She needs to start acting like it." Evian turned his gaze to Tulip, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Tulip felt a shiver run down her spine. "You want me to fight?" she whispered. Evian nodded. "I want you to embrace everything this world has to offer." and everything it demands. The man beside him slid a small black folder across the